So in our last session, we kind of put together papers on social justice and protest, but I think broader issue that we can cover in the last session is kind of what is the role of researchers in our work, and then how does it speak about issues such as mobilization and democracy, and what does it mean to policymakers and public. So I would like us to think about what would be the interaction between researchers and the public and media and policymakers, and in that process, what would be the role of the visuals, and then also there were a couple of questions from the chat in the earlier sessions. What would be the actual process of getting a lot of data, and then what is the concerns, ethical concerns and issues about data analysis, quantitative or qualitative. How can you actually foster those kind of interdisciplinary approaches to solve these new problems? So I hope that we can cover that aspect as well. And finally, we could also talk about some of the computational method as a new way to study this phenomena. So, so the format is still the same. So you could take 90 seconds. I guess most people spend more than 90 seconds. That's completely fine. So 90 seconds, introduce yourself, and then briefly talk about your paper and the finding, and then we'll move on to the questions as we did before. So should we just stick to the order in the program? Stephanie, do you want to go first? Yes.
Yes, thank you. And because we run a little late now, I have presented, I have prepared, like 3 slices I'd like to share with you. It's like not a big presentation, no worries, just a few slices. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about our research project, Still Images, Moving People. And in this, we analyzed how media images of protest issues and movements influence participatory intents of people to protest. And we did this from an information processing perspective. And I think we had a complex research design to study this. We combined what is going on here? Is someone clicking here? Sorry, it's not me. I don't know what's happening. Sorry. So we had a pre and post questionnaire, and in between we tried to analyze the process of perceiving images and the cognitive reflections. I don't know what's going on here. I'm confused. Why is it moving? I'm not moving anything.
I wonder if there's some animation.
No.
Yeah.
Whatever. I just leave it like this. If you can see.
That's all fine. Yeah, right.
Okay. Okay, so we had this study design where we had a pre and a post survey and an eye tracking part. We tracked the eye movements of the people while they were confronted with a series of 4 news articles covering protest issues and visuals of protest issues and protest movements. And then we analyzed how the reception of these photographs and these news articles shaped the participatory intents of our recipients. Our central variables, thus were visual attention, image valence and salience, and we asked how the reception changes the willingness to engage. Our findings were in that point interesting, that we found conditional image effects, but still that images can move people. And what was pretty interesting in our study, I think, was that the sheer perception, the visual observation of images does not per se increase the willingness to engage, but it does if people perceive the images with a negative valence, then a longer observation duration enhances their engagement. And the same, of course, if they attribute a greater saliency to those images. And we also, while this occurs for like all participants, we further investigated cross-level interaction effects related to the political interest. And there we found that image effects are conditional on the political interest of our participants, meaning that in cases of high political interest, the valence did not matter, but it was the longer observation duration that increased the willingness to participate. But in cases of low political interest, positively valenced images reduced the engagement, while negative valence image had no effect. So the big learning of our study is that that we need to examine effects of images not from a general level, but have to closer look into the specific interaction of image features and their subjective perception and evaluation of recipients. And I think this is an important finding because I mean, from a theoretical perspective, we already knew and discussed this, but we need more studies to really look into these differentiated mechanisms. And I think this would be also the main starting point for policy strategies that we can build upon the image effects and what protest movements could learn from these findings. And that is it in a nutshell. Thank you. And sorry for the technical confusion.
That's all right. Yeah. Thank you for the summary. Can we go to Patrick? You want to take over?
Yeah. We can. Okay. Well, I did this with Austin Eubanks, who's a PhD student, and Nick Herson and Cooper Hearn, and their undergraduates. And the name of this is Visual Priming and Framing During the 2020 Democratic Presidential Debates. Electoral Status Predicts Favorable Camera Treatment. And that's it. No, actually, I prepared 105 seconds of prepared statement. So I'm going to go through this as much as possible. I've been interested in primary debates since at least the 2008 presidential primary cycle. While I was focused on audience laughter, it became obvious that more than just this played a role in electoral success. Certainly, the nonverbal behavior of a candidate affected the audience. However, with increasing numbers of candidates on stage, video production played a powerful role in 2016. During the first two pivotal debates, Donald Trump was far and away the dominant force on stage, attaining and holding the camera's focus, underscoring the seriousness of his candidacy. When the 2020 Democratic Party primaries came along, and over 2 nights, 20 candidates clambered on stage, the Democratic National Committee was thoughtful enough to provide me with a field experiment by randomly assigning top-tier candidates and bottom-tier candidates to different nights. Their doing so allowed me to replicate and extend my 2016 study. I pre-registered the hypotheses on Open Science Foundation's website, which provided me the luxury of being publicly wrong. And I was wrong. Unlike the 2016 Republican primary debates where the top 2 candidates of Donald Trump and Jeb Bush dominated camera time, position on stage from the center to the edges was the most powerful measure of electoral status in receiving camera time. And being in the top tier of candidates explained a greater proportion of time in the solo one-shots. So it appeared that the media and the Democratic National Committee learned a lesson from the 2016 presidential primary debates. The question is it the right lesson? Thank you.
Great, fantastic. Exactly 105 seconds. Can we go to Yilang? Could you also introduce yourself and then talk about your work?
Okay, sure. Hello everyone. So I'm going to share my screen, and I have a few slides to show you.
Sure.
Okay, great. can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. So my name is Yilang Peng. I'm assistant professor in consumer analytics and strategic communication at the University of Georgia. So in this research, I investigated how different visual representations of politicians influence audience engagement in Instagram, such as likes and comments. Especially, I introduced a computational method that combined transfer learning and the clustering to automatically find categories of visual media in a large amount of visual data. So for example, here we can see that in politicians' Instagram communication, we can see that there are like 4 large categories of images. For example, we have images in professional political setting, showing these politicians in these like very professional political settings, such as conference rooms and government buildings. We also have these kind of images showing textual messages, figures, and illustrations. We also have these types of images featuring politicians in non-political settings, such as restaurants, gyms, natural environment, and also like vehicles and homes. And last, we also have these types of categories, this category, which is about images of architecture and landscape. So as you can imagine, so these type of images actually get most likes and comments than these like images showing politicians in professional setting. And in addition to that, I also found that these type of images generated a lot of comments instead of likes. And the images of architecture and landscape generated a lot of likes instead of comments. So here we can see that in general, this kind of like personalization generally has a positive effect on audience engagement. So in summary, I also find that other types of self-personalization strategies, for example, like showing faces, displaying emotions, also increase audience engagement. However, a significant portion of politicians' Instagram posts still is about traditional politics as real type of political communication. And last, I think this study also illustrates the potential of applying computational methods in visual politics. And in particular, this study introduced an unsupervised approach that's kind of like similar to topic modeling that can help us extract visual topics from large-scale visual media. Okay, that would be all.
Thank you. Sounds super exciting. Can we go to Renato?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Renato Caetano. I'm a researcher at Margin and a research group specialized in democracy and justice, but also at Medusa, ethnographic photography club at both at UFMG, my university. And my article was written with Professor Ricardo, who was here earlier, but had to leave for a meeting. But it is about the visual self-representation of Brazilian President Jair Messias Bolsonaro on Instagram. And we analyzed 6 months of his posts on Instagram, covering 2 months of his campaign, 2 months after his winning, and the first 2 months of his government. Our main found was that his visual self-representation is represented through parody, which means that he constructs his performance through mockery, which is present in his ambivalent humor and camp style. So that's basically it.
Great. Yeah, Yilang, feel free to stop sharing. I mean, unless you want to. That's very nice. Nice background photograph. So yeah, I think these are really excellent and fantastic groups of papers, and the papers are free to read online in IJPP. But I think this is really excellent and very diverse set of papers, and especially if you look at the data source that they use, and researchers, I mean, in this group use mass media and also social media and also kind of just photographs in kind of isolated context. And then look at diverse aspects of how these visuals communicate to different groups of people in different settings. So I think it's a great opportunity to think about kind of holistically how these visuals are communicated, and then how can we actually understand the effect of those visual communication, because even though these are very diverse settings, and then we all use kind of different methods, computational, but also kind of eye tracking, and also very qualitative theoretical. At the end of the day, I think these papers all try to understand what are the actual effect to human viewers and audience, like to the voters, and then to social media users. What makes me like your photographs, and then what makes me vote for this guy than the other guys. So I think the influence and effect is the important issue, and especially because we are discussing kind of different types of media platforms. So I'm curious, like what would be the kind of cross-platform effect, or how can it compare the effect of the mass media, kind of more traditional journalist, elite-based media, such as TV news, like debate, that kind of setting, versus kind of more democratic communication platform like a social media? What would be the kind of key difference between these two media, and what are their roles, and then how are they kind of moderating this kind of political communication, and then how do they kind of use different strategies to reach out to different audience, and especially what are the lessons that we can learn from their kind of visual aspect? I think those are kind of the general questions that I would like to discuss. It's not very specific, but I think panelists can take those direction, and then free to talk about how you think about it and how you can actually relate those things to your paper. I think that would be helpful for many of us. So who do you want to talk first?
Yeah, maybe I
yeah,
can.
sure. Yeah.
I mean, we have we have pointed out this argument in our limitations actually, because what we did, we studied like news articles, what is a very traditional kind of media information, especially in the political context, and of course the media context could cause different effects, or could maybe alternate the reception of media images. And so in a recent study, we are just in the step to analyze the data. We try to transfer the basic context to Instagram posts and use the same measures to figure out if we can find similar effects when we analyze the potential of news images to increase protest intentions. And what we interestingly found was that, like in our paper, we had this moderator, or this interaction between respondents' characteristics and the image effects. And what we interestingly found in this Instagram setting was that these interactions are even stronger, perhaps because image features are more prevalent in a more visual context like Instagram, and textual information does not as much interfere. I don't know what this means, however. I mean, does this mean that visuals have more or stronger effects when they are presented in context that bring the visual qualities more into the foreground? Or does it perhaps mean that visuals alone have greater effects than with accompanying texts? I think this is an interesting question, and we just don't know enough about the context factors and what these factors bring with them. So I think it's a super important future research field to better acknowledge these, and to maybe the best way is then to, what I think is a very important strand of research would be to compose a study where you have like comparable treatments, but vary only the logic of platform presentation. As far as this is possible, but obviously an Instagram post does simply look different than a news article. Yeah, so far my thoughts.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you. I think Instagram is very interesting. I would also add that I think Instagram also has this like very unique aesthetic that images that are popular on Instagram will be very different than images that are popular on Twitter or like other social media platforms. So my experience with Instagram is that it definitely emphasizes photos that with like really high visual quality. They're like very beautiful, like they're very aesthetic, appealing to human eyes. And you also see like the use of like different photographic techniques that are used more frequently in Instagram's communication. I think that also partly explains why on Instagram, like what I found is that these like personal moments are more likely shared, because I would say Instagram is also emphasizing like these like personal relationships, and they appear like more like ordinary. I would imagine that on Twitter, the images that are more popular on Twitter, they definitely are not necessarily aesthetic appealing. So I would definitely say there are different platforms, and also I would say the algorithms that really change the audience engagement with these visual materials also shape what kinds of images are popular, what kinds of images people tend to engage with, and definitely the platforms definitely play a really huge part in terms of like shaping the effects of visual media.
I would like to add, sorry, just add to the discussion that in Bolsonaro's case, it was very interesting to see how he appropriated of Instagram in a very do-it-yourself way, and his images were very awkward and hyperbolic, which were which created the appeal of the images. So we thought it was interesting to understand how this visual platforms create a form of interaction and create expectations for their public.
Yeah, I agree with all that's been said already. I think that we're looking at so many different levels of analysis that we go from the more broad levels. And even when you get to the more focused, looking at decomposing visual images becomes really interesting and challenging to get an understanding of what the emotions and what the contextual elements play. And if we take into account that we're all looking at the big screen computers versus a cell phone, it makes a difference there as well. So there's so many different elements that can affect how people process this information.
Also, if I may add this, I mean, in our paper, in our study, we found this super interesting moderating effect of political interest. Like the political interests are very easy to catch with catchy images, but the people who are not interested we not only can catch them, but what happens is that they are less interested, less willing to participate. And this is, I think, a warning, an alarming finding to some degree, because when we talk about the potential of visual communication in politics, for me, and like issues and challenges of our contemporary societies, for me, it's definitely a task to help maybe to get the right messages to people. But and from a democratic perspective, it's super important to also inform the less interested about political issues. And images, in my opinion, have always been a medium to catch them. But now our study says maybe it's not so easy. And with the Instagram study, we have the same finding, like the confrontation with visual images addressing political issues decreases the willingness to engage for people with a low interest. I mean, this is like a first sight because the analysis is not yet differentiated, but I think this is really a risk because I would say that different media platforms like Facebook or Instagram could be a chance to reach people who are not interested in politics. But if we go from that standpoint and we then see that it could also demotivate, like in terms of reactance or whatever these images do, it's really tricky. What images can then solve our problem and help us maybe to catch the people that are not interested, but that we need, because otherwise we maybe lose them to conspiracy theorists or to populists or to whomever. And I mean, this is really something that I'm struggling with because I don't really see clear what we can do now.
Yeah, so one kind of interesting and related question that I wanted to also ask was so there are definitely kind of these are new platforms, and then people find their own way to utilize as a producer and also as a consumer, and then we don't fully understand how these things work out. And of course, as a researcher, we're kind of trying to understand how these things function as political media. And then so one question is from the perspective of producer, like political actors or journalists, how much of this process is intentionally done versus accidental? Like, for example, in mass media, like debate, everything is carefully staged and designed beforehand, probably. Patrick may have a different finding, but I think more or less they know what they're doing. They may not, but and then they kind of expect the effect precisely compared to this kind of social media based communication, where I see like some random images get really popular, picked up by many different people, and then make a really huge impact. So that kind of intentional and editorial production and dissemination versus some accidental distribution and kind of more organic process of kind of discussion was kind of interesting question that we could also ask. So if Patrick, do you want to speak more about this kind of intention aspect?
Well, I think there is certainly a behavioral repertoire or a production repertoire that we see with the different networks, and that does play a role. But I think that if you are an individual who is quite capable of manipulating the media through interruptions, through audience responses, such as Donald Trump was able to, he was able to, basically go through a system and utilize it effectively, even though before 2016, we had ways of keeping people like that off stage. Now that we've got more and more people, we have to rethink, is it now the side-by-side press conference that the general election debates are, or is it just a free-for-all? Should we do something that's more along the lines of Family Feud or reality shows? Because what we're doing is we're trying to reach out to the general public, and even the debates themselves originally were based upon game shows. So how do we reach to the public to bring them in to the process, especially when they develop parasocial relationships with individuals potentially beforehand? What's going to stop the next reality show person from jumping on board? Are we going to find someone who's really popular? Like, for instance, I'll go and defer to Erica on this, The Rock. Could he be the next president? I mean, we all have a connection with him, a parasocial connection with him. And so these are the things that we probably need to discuss as well within the TV, the televised aspect. Now, as far as the social media, that's not a strong point of mine. So I'm going to defer to my colleagues here.
Yeah, does anyone else want to add anything to that? Or can we also think about another question of I think Eric asked in the chat. So now these political actors, have so many different channels, and they have different strategies to reach out to different types of voters, and then they can actually call for actions like march to the Capitol and protest there. So so it seems like they're kind of more equipped with more tools to kind of manipulate their perception or kind of alter their behavior and actions. So and then let me put this question this way. So we are all trying to understand the relationship between the kind of media exposure or kind of visual construction of this event, and then the effect on the audience, and then how will that actually affect our behavior. So then will that implication be somehow taken by policymakers or protest organizers, maybe in a good way, to kind of enhance our society and then promote diversity, kind of make a better direction. But also it could be used in kind of negative way, in negative context, like politicians would kind of know better how to kind of manipulate the public, learning from our findings. So what would be the lessons or kind of guidelines as as a researchers that we should be worried about or think about when we present our research findings to the public and then policymakers? Or in other words, what does it mean? Like we find something, we find some relationship between kind of visual and then the collective action, protest. What would it mean to policymakers and the public?
I would say like one idea I kind of want to share with us is that I think most people are not really that interested in politics. Like I would say that the people not participating in democracy is actually a long problem and a long issue that is not really limited to visual politics, but also applies to a lot of like public issues. Like we also have this idea that social media platforms will enable people to be to have like higher incidental exposure to news, which is not really the case. I think by recent evidence is that we still see this gap between people who are highly interested in politics versus people who are not really interested in politics. I think even if we have the power of like visuals, it's still very hard to reach people who are not really interested in politics. And I would also add to this point is that even I study visual communication, and often than not, what I found is that most of the visuals are not really effective. Like you only have like a very small number of visuals that have certain characteristics that can really become like viral or popular on social media. That like people are actually like circulate these images and influenced by this image, but these images are very limited. Like you can only see like a few examples. For example, like in the past week, the most memorable image might be the Bernie Sanders sitting in the chair, right? But it's only one image that has been surfaced from this like millions of or billions of images that have been uploaded to social media platforms like on each day. So I would say that we really need to understand like what specific visuals tend to become those like very iconic or like very viral images that can actually have like huge influence. And we also have to study why images failed to communicate certain messages and ideas to the public.
I think that's a great point. So, and then to me, it seems very necessary to understand not only how we as individual process one images, while when we actually use some Instagram or kind of TV news, but I think it is also important to understand the process of dissemination, like what actually gets popular collectively, and then what do I see on social media? What kind of photographs will I see, and why? Maybe because algorithm recommended, but maybe because my friends saw it and then reacted, liked it, and then I get to see it. So those kind of a process of dissemination is kind of more broader level of intellection, but I think we need to combine that aspect with kind of more traditional investigation that we all have been doing, kind of understand like a really close-up analysis between images and meaning and then the perception. But combine those two aspects, I think we can have better understandings about how this kind of media images would affect and kind of shape the political communication. So I think that's a great point. And then so moving next, so I also want to talk about kind of methodological advances and issues, and then also like we also asked this question in the previous session. But how do you collect your data? And then in my experience, it's not easy to collect or maintain those kind of data sources and databases. So I'm curious, and then also what would be kind of the protocols for data analysis, especially for computational and quantitative analysis, and what would you recommend to practitioners or students who want to learn this new method in their research project? So I think that would be a helpful thing that we can discuss. Maybe Yilang, you can take on that first, and then the other panelists can also add to it.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I agree with you. I think analyzing visual media, especially in social media images, is definitely a really huge challenge because you often are dealt with a really large amount of data, and often than not, I just found out, like, for example, my disk is going to be running out of space. This is something that I typically encounter. Like, I have to make sure that I have enough storage, I have enough computational power to process visual data. So what I found is that I think Instagram data are really easy to gather. For example, like there are a few Python libraries that allow you to do that. So, and also I was recently introduced to this like CrowdTangle. So this is a platform published by Facebook. So as a researcher, you can actually request access to its database, and it's very easy to get data from either from Facebook or from Instagram. So basically, even if you're not really familiar with computational methods, what you need to do is basically enter a keywords, and then they will send you like a CSV file for you to process. So I would say like data collection is not really that difficult compared with the actual process of like managing clean data and also like trying to analyze visual data.
Well, I can speak more to the micro level in the sense that what I try to do is my research basically is looking at politicians and their facial display behavior, because I find that looking at them and seeing their displays in between the words gives us more information as far as the reliability of what their statement is. Because, hey, people lie, words are cheap, but the nonverbals are much more emotionally, viscerally expensive. So that's the great difficulty, with the exception of the side-by-side debates of the national debates that we have for the presidency. So I find that the great difficulty is being able to get from onset to offset when we have interviews, which is when you do want to see the candidates responding non-verbally to questions. And so with that, it's something that I've been trying to discuss with C-SPAN, as well as I think that we need to discuss with the networks as well, is that providing frame-by-frame analysis, frame-by-frame presentation of interviews, so we can look at this interaction. So that's very much at the micro level. I don't do as much at the macro level, but I really loved your slide, Jungseock, at the beginning of this presentation, looking at how we can analyze over a time frame, because when we're looking at politicians, when we're looking at campaigns, oftentimes it's the slow drip of information that is being provided that has long-term effects. And I look at with Ricardo and Renato's, their paper, which I looked at the images there, and he's wearing a soccer jersey, and I don't know what's the team, what's the soccer team that he's or football team that he's wearing.
It's Palmeiras, but it's a special detail is that the jersey is, in Portuguese we say fake one, a copy.
Okay.
And it's not original, but we took all of those images from Instagram as well, collecting manually.
Okay, so that tells us some really incredible social information there. Much like Erdogan, he wears the star from that football team. And so by the fakeness, he's saying, hey, look, I'm like you, the normal guy who can't afford to buy this. And so that's the information that we're getting told over a long period of time, which is why being able to access is so important, and why this ethnographic insights are so important, and why what you're doing is so important, but connecting it up with the broad scale analysis that Jungseock, that you do and that you've done with Eric, that, man, that just makes me so excited seeing this and reading the papers here, of course, with Yilang and Stephanie. Man, you're doing some great stuff.
Thank you. I maybe jump on Yilang's comment to download data from social media. And we had a somewhat comparable but somewhat different experience with the download of TikTok videos, because this is like you can for the first step, you can easily download like thousands of TikTok videos, but one download does not equal the other. So there's something in the algorithm that downloads the videos, but you don't know what. But it's like a random, I don't know if it's a random sample of all, it should be all available videos that are summarized under one claim, but that is not, and I don't know why. And this this mirrors, I think, a bigger issue in big data sampling strategies, because if you work with like scripts or little programs or apps or whatever, or like crowd tanglers, it's always that it's not perfectly in your hand what your sample is. And you maybe get a bias in your data and you don't know it, and you don't know how to interpret it, or how to, I don't know, what to do with your data. What does your data mean then? I mean, we have thousands of videos, so it's perfect, and I think we can do an analysis with it, but I think it's a big limitation, and we don't really know how big this big is. And I think this is something that we already know and discuss when it comes to the automated scraping of texture content, but it also holds for visual content. And this is something I think we should also keep in mind.
Well, I couldn't agree more with all of you. I think Professor Stewart, really, I stand by what you said. I think it's very interesting to compare all the studies and see how different methodologies bring important aspects of ways of approaching an object of study. And we are very excited to learn new techniques, or to build cooperative studies, or to compare populists' visual performances. And I believe that this mixed methodology approach is very, very interesting and very promising. So we were very excited as well.
Yeah, I have one comment. I think go back to Stephanie, the question about like the algorithms. I think what I'm trying to do is that, like, I understand that like this is a very challenging problem. So what I'm trying to do is that I will by myself like come up with my sampling frame. For example, like I will locate a pool of users I'm interested in. I will also determine like the time frame that I'm looking at. So basically, for example, like I can do a random sampling of time frames. Like I can look at specific data points. And I would say in this method, you can actually have like a very strategic way to identify your pool of users and also like the time frame you want to look at. I think in that way, it partially address the problem that of this like algorithm, like we don't really know like what is going on behind this like data collection API or like algorithms.
Yeah, I think those are really great points that we all need to think about. And for sure, there are a lot of things that we don't know about, but at least I think this is very helpful forum to think about what we don't know. And it seems like at least we know what we don't know about. So and I think one clear direction that we should consider as a significant seems to be we kind of need to collaborate. Because as all the panelists said, there are kind of different types of methodology that may apply to kind of more broader level or more specific level, and then we kind of have different media platform and different countries. Again, it's international, so one pattern in one context in one country means something different in different countries. So I think it really requires us to kind of have a bigger team and come up with kind of collective research agenda. So I think I'm sure that that's the direction that will be headed. So so I think that's what this panel can inform us. And then because in the interest of time, I will hand it over to Eric because we also have virtual social. And then I think there's some booths as well. Wasn't that the plan? So yeah, thank you everyone. Yeah.
Thank you, Jungseock. I think you were bringing the open bar, right? We could do that virtually.
Oh yeah. It's still 9 a.m. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
We wanted to conclude with some kind of summary comments and just key takeaways, and it's going to be more or less top of mind, but wanted to just get Christian and Jungseock's thoughts on the issue, the area, and the symposium. And then if there's anything left, I'll add my 2 cents. But Christian, what are your thoughts looking at this as a topic area, as something that's now in the journal that the journal has really helped kind of solidify, and even the number of articles and the amount of material that's here?
Yeah, I mean, in a slogan, I think visual politics is politics. When I started doing research, I used to call myself, I research, the internet and politics. That was like 15 years ago. And now basically, everyone who's doing research in political communication is researching some aspects related to what happens online, on the web or on social media, on private messaging apps and so forth. And I think in a way, when we look at the richness, not only of the papers, but of the discussion, yeah, we're interested in visual aspects, but we're interested in aspects that are completely central to political communication. This is not a subfield, although it can be considered as such, but it really, all political communication should focus on these issues. It's impossible to understand these issues if we only limit ourselves to the textual component of the content we study, of its effects. And I think we need to recognize that the reason why this is not always done in our field is not that people don't try or don't want to, but that it's really hard, because I think as Western scientific cultures, we have still to come to get to grips with the richness of visual content. I mean, what the depth of what Betsy said in her keynote about the relationship between evolution in our brains and how we process things. I mean, these things are not well understood, and they're difficult to fit into the very refined research designs that we have developed. It can be done, of course, as the work shown here and the work done by people who have participated demonstrates, but it's arguably harder, and it has been done in a less refined way than it has been done for the textual component of political communication that we're familiar with, and so I think what the special issue and the symposium really showed, is that there is a lot of work going on trying to address a lot of very important challenges that are not only about visual politics, they are about how to do, useful, innovative social science research in 2021. And I think that is what makes it, really exciting.
Jungseock, what are your kind of summary comments, and how do you see these different areas kind of intersecting?
Yeah, so I think Kristen and also Eric, you already kind of covered much of my thoughts as well. But one issue as a person who's coming from kind of more method specific discipline like statistics and computer science, I sometimes feel there's some disconnect between method and substance. Like people coming from more kind of traditional background in visual communication, and also people from political science and people from computer science. So they have different theories and different languages and different tools and different research. I mean, research questions are not that different actually, but the approaches that we're taking are all different. So how can we develop kind of more inclusive research environment where people study theory and then study method can collaborate more efficiently? I think that's one challenge for the community to foster the progress going forward, because they have pretty different background, and those background may not overlap at all. And then that as a from my experience has been difficult, but we'll need to try to kind of work together and kind of collaborate more to kind of come up with new theories and new method, because I don't think it's possible to use just the existing theory to explain all these kind of different types of new data and new event and new behavior. So we'll need new theories, but likewise, I think we need new method, new computational method, computational resource, and also data set. So I think that's something that we need to try to address collectively rather than independently.
Right, thanks for that. And I would just tag on to that. Part of the grand collaborative idea is to establish like infrastructure, research infrastructure, like databases or archives, and to get more people doing it. I think it can start out kind of small and maybe ad hoc, kind of like the UCLA archive did, I think, during the Watergate hearings back in the 70s. And then if there's momentum and eventually funding, it could be built out, and particularly to make it available to the field, which is, I think we need to practice what we preach by making our visuals more accessible for reanalysis or different kinds of analysis. And, I've got some image data sets and Patrick's got some, and I don't know about, the copyright issues, but, we've got this material, it can be reanalyzed. Be interesting to see if we just posted it and if anybody objected or not. The other thing is, when events are happening out there, I got really interested in the idea of the 360-degree camera. And after Trump got elected, I sent a student to the Women's March on Washington the day after, or I think it was the day of the inauguration, might have been the day after. And he went with 4 different cameras, and some were standard fixed frame, and some were 360, and some were video, and some were still image. And we took back a kind of a treasure trove of images. I've got over 5,000 images and video from that event alone. When I was in the UK in 2018, I took part in one of the People's Marches for another vote about Brexit. The vote never happened, but the march did. And there was hundreds of thousands of people, and I was in the middle of it recording video because I had learned from the other study that when you show people video and give them agency to determine the frame and the perspective, that they're less suspicious and they don't think it's set up, and they don't call the people holding signs crisis actors or paid for by the liberals and all this stuff that you hear in right-wing media, suddenly their concerns kind of melt away. And so this is another thing we can do, is look at ourselves as kind of archival curators and even collectors, and feed that into different platforms and systems, because there isn't that much great 360-degree video out there. But I was thinking, every time I see a protest now, it's like somebody needs to go out there and record with 360. So that's part of it. I think another part of this effort and the idea of the collaborative program is to map out the methods and the tools that are already available. And as some people were asking about, is there a central kind of knowledge base of this? And right now there isn't. There's a few books here and a few books there. There's some books in the works, which is interesting. And one is Damien Trilling, who's participant today, is a co-author of, and it's on computational analysis of communication. Another new handbook on visual politics is in the work by Darren Lilliker. And then if I can get my act together with Zelia Dumitrescu, I should be editing a book myself. And so these become then area defining texts that people then know about. So I think another part of this program, of course, I want it to have real world impact too, but another part of this program is to start using a common phrase. And for instance, you could look at the way political psychology has grown as a recognized area, in part because they have a journal of that name, they use the phrase, and there's a consensus about what it means. So this is a question, because it's so early on, does visual politics, will it work as a phrase and a concept as an area moving forward? And so I think it may be worthwhile to think about in your papers, if you're doing work in this area, to mention that phrase and just see, will it catch on? Will it be the kind of the new political psychology? Because frankly, even though we're doing a lot of work in visuals, there still isn't much work being done in visuals. And then if you look at some of the other issues, in terms of historical work, longitudinal work, comparative work, there's even less being done. There's kind of a discrepancy now between the large scale stuff that doesn't have much detailed description and the small end stuff that's highly descriptive, but is very limited in sample. So one thing I would warn against, because I've seen this in the technology realm, is, and I think it's important to think about as well, is to not reinvent the wheel. If we have existing typologies, methods, tools, frameworks, start with those. And if they're sufficient, use them. And Patrick and I have done that in the nonverbal area with tools and techniques and frameworks that were developed basically in the 80s, but have evolved over time. And they were just sitting there. And particularly in the 90s, it was really puzzling to me as a graduate student, because everybody was saying, well, visuals are very amorphous, and, how do you get a handle on them? And we could call them kind of, maybe there's like a gestalt feeling of kind of holistic meaning. No. If you're looking very specifically at a frame, for instance, and even visual framing was in its infancy, or if you're looking at a nonverbal display, as Betsy was talking about, there are very consistent patterns of animal and primate behavior that have very consistent and evolutionary signaling kind of meanings. And it's not amorphous, and it's not unknown. And in fact, animal behaviorists and people in ethology, human ethology and animal ethology, have been using those frameworks for a long time. So some of it is identifying what's already out there, but then applying it to our areas of interest. Just a couple other thoughts on trying to get this area going would be to maybe publish in some common journals. I think there's, they're pretty well known, but it'd be nice to see work that use the phrase visual politics appear repeatedly in some consistent journals, so that people start to realize, hey, there's something going on there. I think it's a phrase that rolls off the tongue, unlike some other ones I've used. mostly media biopolitics, but Patrick knows about that. That doesn't roll off the tongue, but visual politics does. And then finally, you know, to make statements or to broaden the area or to continue to build it by hosting other conferences and symposia, special issues, in any way we can kind of bring the community together, because I find these events really valuable. And the silver lining for, you know, out of COVID is putting us all in a virtual space, which, as Christian's pointed out before, enables more people to participate from a broader, you know, range of the world, because the cost is low as long as you can get online and use the platform. And that also kind of creates a community that can then, you know, check the work later because we can post it online. So there's conversation happening in chat, there's conversation in real time, and then there's a record of it afterwards. And so we can promote this afterwards, which is just tremendous advantage compared to showing up to a conference once, a session once, 5 people are in the room, and then it's over. You know, hey, it's on my CV. It doesn't have impact, but I think these kind of events can. So really happy to see the turnout today. And I think it was good. We had over 175 people registered, and I think they came in and out as time allowed. So Christian, maybe you can give us just a little sense of how long it'll take before we can post the stuff on YouTube, and then we can call it a day.
Eric, sorry, now I want to say one more thing, can
Sure.
I? I want to add to, sorry, Christian.
No
I want
worries.
to add one just final thing to your very good list of things that ought to happen to, you know, facilitate momentum here. And the other thing, well, the one thing I want to add is it might be time for a big grant where several of us work together. And I think this has to happen cross-continentally. So I want to just say this. If I know there's a lot of money in Europe, actually, a lot of money for large research projects. But I want to just say this. If there are some of you are looking at grants to pursue research about visuals, and you think I can be of help as a contributor to that, please feel free to contact me. I think a massive grant that brings some coherence to a group of studies, multi-methods, multi-disciplinary perspectives, I think that could serve as another point of getting momentum. Thank you.
Challenge
If I
accepted.
may,
I
Christian,
think that's a great suggestion. Israel.
Yeah, just one thing, since much of our work is grounded as we had a great keynote speaker on evolutionary theory, on social psychology, much of the criticism we get when we do send stuff is that, well, how do you know this works in other places? So we can get two birds with one shot. One would be to collaborate among ourselves and work together, which would be fun and interesting and enriching. But second of all, by comparing subsets from Asia, America, South America, Middle East, we make the work stronger. I'm working with currently on a project with like 20 countries that looks at dominance. And by doing it cross countries and continents, I think we'll be able to hammer the issue that it's actually human, and it's not just, oh, those are Israelis are aggressors and therefore so and so, or the Swedes are so much aggressors that it's because of them. So and in the process we're working in a group, which is great because we are learning from each other, and it will build, I think, the community on the one hand that Eric you talked about, and Christian, it will also make the international element much more salient.
Right. I will just, as editor, one thing that journals can do is not only, select and publish research and help it, develop, but it's create communities of people that want to solve problems that are bigger than what each individual or each department, each research team can do. And if we can do something like that, with, some of us getting involved in, in a collaboration and grant proposals and, doing even more work that can, contribute to moving the field forward. And then I think, personally, that's one of the reasons why I accepted the job as editor, which has a lot of, bad, difficult moments and unpleasant and pleasant, parts. So if that outcome would be exactly what I was hoping for when, Eric and I started talking about a special issue in visual politics. So that would be a very nice step forward.
Terrific. Well, I think with that we can say the symposium is now concluded and has been a success. Thank you again for all of your contributions, both the people who presented, the people who were in the roundtables, the keynote speaker, but also the people who are on chat, because that's another advantage of this platform. It really makes the whole event so much richer. How many times do you have in person to ask a question and then, the moderator gets annoyed because you got your hand up again? Well, it doesn't happen in this platform. So I love it. So I think we're going to stick around for the happy hour, coffee hour, and kind of decompression hour, at least for a few minutes. So it'll be a short hour. But happy to chat for a little while if you want to hang out. But anybody else who's got to get going, I fully understand that too. And thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
And thanks, Eric and Jungseock, for really doing an amazing job at putting
Thank you too. Yeah.
together.